flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I learned late today that two selectmen will not be here tonight. Kathy Richards has a family emergency that she needed to attend to, and Mr. Pelton is unable to attend tonight. Another family commitment. So the next item is approval of minutes from August 3rd, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
By Brian, seconded by Kitch. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next is to accept the agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Kitch, seconded by Brian. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Under communications and correspondence, I don't have anything tonight. So we'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment at this point? And we'll move on to old business. And I put on the agenda tonight the referendum question, which we anticipate having for the November 2016 ballot. And I want to ask the selectmen for, again, some direction in terms of whether you would like one question, whether there's going to be two questions, if you have any particular requests. We have, I will tell you, we've interviewed and are about to select a financial advisor, which will help us in terms of the dollars and making sure that they are fashioned over the period of time over which the bonds would be sold, and that will be helpful to us as we formulate the actual question. So I'll open it up to the board for discussion.
I was under the impression that we already discussed having it as a single question based on if you have wants and needs. Unfortunately, a lot of people would go for the wants and not necessarily the needs, so I think we're better off as having one question and go from there.
Brett?
Yeah, I think, you know where I am, I'm clearly in favor of
One question.
One question.
Brian?
Generally speaking, I believe one question is appropriate.
Okay.
I think it
Agreed.
depends on actually what's going to be
Yeah.
discussed. Two, perhaps three issues, but other issues.
Which issues do?
Well, you're obviously talking about the park, you're always obviously talking about infrastructure issues. It sounds like we're discussing a roadway, which I would think of as three separate issues, and I might feel differently about that depending on what's actually going to be proposed. But generally, I'm in favor of one.
Okay.
Same.
On the 23rd, we do have another meeting scheduled with Long Range Capital, which you'll get some more details. I think you've gotten enough details on the recreational park, which we talked about recently, but we will hopefully have some additional information. I know Rick Kelsey is somewhere in the room. I don't know if you wanted to comment, Rick?
No, we'll wait till Tuesday.
23rd, right, Rick?
Yep.
Okay, so we will schedule that meeting and get more detail at that point.
For the record, I won't be available for that meeting, and neither will
neither will
Kathy. And I'm not sure if Mike will be back or not.
And who
I'm
else
not-
can? Okay.
I'm not available right now.
Just so.
Thank you for letting me know.
So
that's
if we can just
three
do
will
it the
not be
following,
here.
so if we can do it the following week, that might be better.
You're getting tight. That'll be the 30th. Correct? And then you have to have the actual question written, formulated, and given to the town clerk by the 8th. So we meet, I believe, on the 7th of September. You will need to have a final vote that night so that we can give it to the town clerk the very next day. Is there any other date that might be convenient?
We're trying to do this one.
The
23rd?
23rd is what Long Range Capital, isn't that right?
Isn't that
Yes.
that's a Tuesday.
That's a Tuesday.
But I won't have my information on the sidewalks or the road for that meeting anyways. So the 30th might be a better day. You have all the information possible.
To get into the next week
Sidewalks at
works
least.
for me.
That's better for Kitch?
Yeah, if we go into the next week, yeah.
That's the
Thank you.
30th? You're welcome.
30th works for myself. I don't want to speak for Kathy, but she
That's better.
I think it would be better for her.
Oh, but she did tell me ahead of time.
Yes.
Fred?
30th is what day?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, a week from
Tuesday?
the 23rd.
So we'll make it the 30th.
Okay,
Hey, Rick?
thank you.
Yeah, sounds good.
30th, oh.
Susan, we have to tell Long Range then that there's been a change because they'll have to try to get there on that day too.
They did issue a report which we forwarded to you, and I will do my best to make sure they're able to come on the 30th. But we had sent out the 23rd and didn't hear back from too many people, so maybe some of you were away. I'll make it the 30th, and I will notify the chairman tomorrow. There's no member here tonight, is there, from Long Range Capital? Yes, hi. Are you available, Chris, on 30th?
Yep.
Would you let others know if you happen to see them?
I will send it to them now.
All right, thank you.
What time is there time?
It'd be 7 o'clock?
to
7?
7.
Doesn't work?
7. Is there anything else that you need for your edification or your information? You mentioned 3 items, meaning sidewalks, roads, and the park, Brian?
We're supposed to have it before, I think we've talked about, it depends on whether you, I guess sidewalks and roads are infrastructure, but I thought we were talking about other things as well, but certainly sidewalks, the road that you're talking about, and the park.
Well,
And
I think the reality is that, you know, from the Long Range Capital, there's a ton of things on it, and that's what we're gonna end up discussing and where we put the importance. I mean, the reality is, we're gonna be presented a lot of stuff in a short amount of time and try to, I don't wanna use the word guess what's the best decision, but, yeah, try to, right, so.
The
I
list
think-
that we've received says, identifies some needs that need to be addressed in less than 1 year's time, so obviously those would certainly be open for discussion.
I would say.
And not everything would be perhaps appropriate for a bond
Right.
question.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're not appropriate for other ways of funding. So, you know, to put the question on the ballot would be for the bond authorization.
Could, I guess to save time, could you check what is bondable, if that's the right word, and what isn't? Because I know on certain rules, if it's a repair, it's not. So we should see which items, so we're not discussing things that can't even be put on anyway, you know, just to save some time. If we have to fund them in other ways, we're gonna have to fund them in other ways, but, so let's not get caught up in wasting time on that if we could figure out what is bondable and what isn't.
And I hope by that date, we will also have with us the financial advisor, which would be helpful in terms of some of those questions. Also, and certainly the life of the investment is part of the, whether it's bonded or whether it's paid for in another way, whether it's a short-term note or it's cash or it's planned purchase. Definitely be the life of the investment.
Right, and I think that goes back to what you were mentioning, 1 year, Kitch. I think if we're bonding, for example, 10 years, we're gonna need to look at, 20 years, then we're definitely gonna need to play this out on paper and see
Right.
what needs to be done and what doesn't.
Yes,
Brett?
yeah, Susan, just a couple of things. One is that it would appear that, as we look at the list in terms of absolutes and needs, et cetera, the board of selectmen being the policy board will have to make some decisions, I would think, with the recommendations that will come down through long-term and the input they got from the various departments. But ultimately, I think we're gonna have to make some of those broader decisions in terms of what's gonna happen, so that'll take some time, I think. And the other thing is the financial aspect of it. That would be great if that person who will be on board. And because some of the concerns I had were just getting some kind of a rough early estimate in terms of what the cost will be for the town. So hopefully that if that person's on board, they can, maybe not that night, but they should be able to hopefully get something back to us. I'm not looking for an exact number, but I think we need that.
Because it certainly depends on the interest rate at the time of the issuance, and it also depends on the phasing of the bond
That's
essentially 3 years.
That's the school debt, right?
Yes.
Okay. Fred, I think we're the one that's gonna come up with that dollar amount, but I know where you're going with it. If you took the absolute needs, I think that was 13 million, and if you took the ball field at 5.5, you're at 18 and change. So if you're saying that that all of it is on the table, or is potentially could, then I guess we would, is that what you want your numbers based on? Otherwise, we have to come
No,
up with the numbers.
I'm looking at a much more modest number. I'm not looking at that. Realistically, you know, we're at maximum, from my viewpoint, we're at roughly 10 or less than 10 million. That's basically,
Yeah.
I can't see us, you know, we'll have all this, all this information, but in the short term, in this go-around, there's no way we could pay for all the things that are on the list. It's impossible. Not gonna happen.
If they're
Unless
all-
you know something that I don't.
Well, I know they're on a list now as a need. They're not on the list as a want. I believe there was another 18 million in wants.
Yeah.
If you're on a list as a need, whether we think we can afford it or not, we need to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And
Talk
we
about
need
it,
to, and we need to realistically have a plan on how to achieve the needs. I think we'd be short-sighted if we didn't have a serious plan to take care of our long-term needs. I think that, to
No, I
me,
agree.
it's pretty
There's
simple.
no question about that, but I'm saying on this particular
Oh, yeah.
go-around, we're not going to be doing a.
I think it's safe to say the needs will always exceed the ability dollars. There's always going to be needs, absolutely. Ready to move on? Are there any appointments to boards and commissions tonight? I have none. Then we'll move on to, we have a guest tonight, Dan Bertram is here, and he's going to be discussing his application for fixed assessment that came into the office. You have a copy of it in your packets. The assessor's office is still reviewing this application. I did not bring, because we are not prepared to react to the application, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to listen to Dan and his presentation tonight. I know that there are a couple of people that wanted to make a couple of comments at some point as well, so we will perhaps, is there a slide presentation? So
Yeah, I
we
just
will
want to
move
turn this
the-
on and find you.
Okay.
Before you get started, I just want to put one thing on the record. I'm a minority owner of an LLC in Portland that I believe was, at least in these go-arounds, there's been 3 tax abatements that I'm aware of. Our LLC was the applicant of the first one. It's the Chris Cody Golf Building. It didn't affect me in any way. It's a pass-through scenario. And once again, I'm a minority owner of it. Just to give you guys brief history on that, we had a parcel that had a residential house on it. We agreed to remove the house and build a 6,720 square foot commercial building. The taxes that used to be paid, the taxes that the town used to receive per year were approximately $4,000 a year, and it was a residential property which could have children in the school system. Part of this abatement that was given to that LLC, the taxes went to approximately $10,000, and there was $3,000 a year approximately credit per year, so approximately $9,000 in credit per year, but the town went up to $7,000 with no children in the school system. Part of the agreement was to have, and it spelled out to remove the residential use, which was obviously a win for the town of Portland. So I wanted to put that on the record.
Probably not make grants, so we can get away from this thing.
It's just a random screensaver, so sorry if we're setting any expectations there. All right, everybody can see that all right? Well, first off, good evening. Thank you for having me. We're here to talk about the Elm Crest property, and I think I'll kind of dive in. The applicant for the deferral of assessment increase is actually a joint venture between BRT, which is a second generation family business, what I'm part of, and I personally have a lifetime relationship with Fred Hassan, who's one of my favorite people, and he's the guy who brought me to Portland. We're in partnership on other deals with the DiMarco Group, which is a fourth generation family real estate operation out of Rochester, New York. The way that I have kind of viewed the conversation about this process of coming up with the right solution really has to involve the VCI report if it's going to be a complete coverage. I came onto the scene late 2014, early 2015, and it was just at the time my first meeting with Susan was, hey, we just got this grant approved for a study. And so we came before this board in that February, but this slide is about the VCI report and essentially the selection process, the public meetings that went on through the spring of last year, and the dialogue that we were able to be part of and witness kind of drove everything that's been happening. So when that report was completed in July of 2015, it was endorsed by the Board of Selectmen unanimously, incorporated in the plan of development, and the most recent progress following sort of the template there was the zoning amendment. The key findings in the report had to do with the historic preservation, and I see a lot of people who I've seen at meetings for quite a year and a half now, and the Brainerd House, Sage House, and Hart Jarvis House are really the trophy assets that are on the site. The town center approach certainly is an opportunity with this site, where it's located and it's the size of the project, all that VCI process that led to kind of.
You just see that because we're filming it, you're right in the middle of it. Okay,
Sure,
so you can-
sure.
you just sit
So
down.
yeah, I'd be happy to. I just have to be able to reach here to
Yeah,
change the
that's
slides.
fine. Okay. No
Is this good for everybody?
That's fine,
Okay. All right, so essentially, we have, one of the findings in a market review was an increase in residential density. And also, there were some takeaways in terms of where the appropriate parts of the development would be residential away from Maine, near Perry, and commercial near Maine. The action plan that was in the report detailed 8 different things. So we sort of stepped through those in the context of tonight's conversation. And number one, just kind of the partnership and communication with the owners. That's an ongoing thing. I highlighted key parts of each section. The investment's a key opportunity. That's obviously what we're talking about. And 2 is what we recently administered with the zoning commission. Now, 3, 6, and 7 are all very related. They're subsequent steps after zoning regulations are changed. And so the project review and approval requires a site plan to be filed, and that's a plan. Our next step is frankly that. Related to that are the sidewalk and street infrastructure and site access. A lot of these things go towards the information that the Cecil Group put out. We view it as a combination of that and the historic preservation, and I can talk about, as we get to the site plan, what other considerations that went into the design that we're proposing. So we have it. The last point is ongoing, and it's in any good project between public and private partnerships. And that's just kind of working together and coming up with a shared vision, and we have a bunch of opportunities to work together on parts of this site. So if I go back in time, in 2015, we had applied really at the very beginning of our getting to know each other, and it was for a 7-year tax abatement. We had put a minimum investment of $20 million. The application was approved that February prior to the administration VCI process, but we took it as an endorsement of, an appetite to work together. And that's how and why we dove in and went to work. Now, we did have one selectman who voted against the application that night, and we essentially look at today as an opportunity to address what the state of concern was then, because I don't know what we're going to be building over there on that site. I think Mr. Black had so if we go now to the actual proposal that was in the application, I'd like to kind of step through the history of how this evolved. And so if you take a look here, we first have the Brainerd House. The Brainerd House, to me, when I came onto the site and looked and saw the buildings that were designated as historic, jumped out as far and away the most exceptional building on the parcel.
Would you like me to wait to continue, or? Okay. No, one of the selectmen had to walk out, so I was just making sure. I'm happy to stop for a moment if you.
Brian had to take a phone call, so.
Okay.
Just wait a minute, he should be right now.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm trying to present to as many of the selectmen as were available tonight. Sorry, guys. Sure. Sure. Had my last slide not been a lead-in to addressing his stated concerns from the past, I might keep talking, but it seems appropriate to hang out for a minute. This will make excellent footage, right? Wave it. considers the input.
I apologize, I had a poor call.
No worries, no worries.
I didn't realize you were going to wait for me.
I wanted to show you the plan, so.
Okay, we can,
All right,
reconvene.
back to it, okay. So, starting with the building blocks for what we had put together, and this is a plan that evolved monthly until right now, frankly. But it started with an analysis of the Brainerd house, and to me, like I say, it was the trophy asset on the site. And we took a step back and said, well, what can be done if we try to design the entire project around that building? And that's what we set out to do. So that manifested in the move of the main entrance. It also allowed for a walk open parkish area for the, which can absolutely be a town amenity from the standpoint of giving some of that walking, sitting, biking feel. Of course, the biking is just across along Marlborough there. But that was building block number one, and we laid out the rest of the site incrementally and kind of got something out there to market. So these pieces, starting with the Brainerd house, that informed the name Brainerd Place because of its significance, I think, here. Led to a residential portion here. This is a 3-story building. This is a 4-story building, and puts the residential on this side of the site. And then allowing the commercial build out. This is a coffee shop here. This had originally been proposed just to be a commercial building, and working with Deanna and going back and forth, we were able to plan around the Sage House staying in place here. And so that is the Sage House minus an addition that was put on that's not historic in nature across the back. Then there's a proposed pharmacy here. And then this back part of the site was one of the things that has been the trickier part of the puzzle. And so we had at different times laid out a bigger box scenario. Having gone to market, talked to people, and gotten feedback, we feel that a smaller scenario was going to be more effective. And we were also having the conversation about the Hart Jarvis house. And the Hart Jarvis house was, as it stands today, about where my pointer is. And so the problem with that is having any retailers want to be in here if their line of sight as you come down Main Street and Marlborough to be able to see into the storefronts. So it was not possible to keep it in its existing location. And what we had worked on, because any plan that anyone would have seen prior to this application to the Selectmen was the same all through here, but then this back southwest corner is a little different. And so I'll take you through the changes and the reasons why. We had been at a stakeholder meeting, the Elmcrest Campus Advisory Committee, and had the idea proposed for the Hart Jarvis house, which is actually oriented towards the river, to be relocated to the southwest portion. At the time, we were working on a grocer lead, and we were trying to keep that servicing, and I wasn't seeing how to do that service in the back. What you have here, though, because sometimes I guess a failure opens, one door closes, another door opens, but when we took a step back and said, okay, big box doesn't look like it's going to be effective here, then I kind of went back to the notes of what had been proposed and said, well, this is our time to try to do it if we can. So in the tax application, we talk about this building being 35,000 or 36,500 square feet on the first floor, and that's retail. On top of it, you have a commercial office, and that's the entire top of it. Whether or not that's absorbable into this marketplace is a little bit of an unknown. So we have a proposal now. If you could see this grid, it basically calls for 94,000 square feet of total commercial, in addition to the residential piece over here, not including the Brainerd house, which will serve as an amenity to the residential. So what we were able to do in making these trade-offs is, and the reason I gave the elevation is just because, you know, we've spent so many time with these buildings and we think everybody's got the image in their head, but this is the Hart Jarvis house. And I put it here next to this to give you a sense for what the experience would be coming over. Say you just catch a line of sight around here coming off the bridge. And so acting as your first entry statement into Portland that I think is special is right here at this intersection with some of the Welcome to Portland, you know, signage and whatnot. But I think we could actually, and this was not my idea, I'm just citing why this was the proposal. It was a good idea, and it took us a while to figure out how to do it. But I think this is a great Welcome to Portland statement, for that to be looking back over onto Main Street. So. That was very funny. Well, that would be amazing if Siri could take in a site plan application and say, "Hey, I vote yes." You know, I would get to the folks at Apple about that. So, but the southwest corner with this building is the new piece, and a little bit of, well, we'll go for it and we'll try to get a little more commercial in the form of office on the top floor of this building. Those are the things that are different from what folks have seen thus far. Now, in order to visualize pieces, I added a picture of the Hart Jarvis. To give a sense for the residential, I included a few pictures of a project that we've built in Brookfield, Connecticut, and some people have made the trip down there to see it and just get a sense of what the buildings look like. In this case, and I took this picture today, and it's, forgive, it's a little distorted here, but I snapped a picture to show this was an historic barn that was on the property that we were sensitive to the town in. Essentially, I'd like to say it was restoration, but the original barn was in such incredibly bad shape. We actually just built a new building. This cupola is original, but everything else is a brand new building. But to the exact design and specification of the prior. This is a look at what these types of buildings, the elevation when you have 3 stories of residences and then a garage level below, and we would go to our indigenous stone here up in Portland and have a matching palette from there to incorporate the best design. This is a picture again from today. This is an inside of that barn structure. But it's this is going to be just a party room in the upstairs with elevator access. It's a nice thing. And I hesitated to put this in because it's not finished, but I think you can get the idea of what process is going on there to rework something from the past, but in a very cool fashion. This job I cite for a couple of reasons. One, the unit mixing. 70% studios and 1 bedrooms, 30% 2 bedrooms. We anticipate doing the same thing for that first 102 unit building up on this project. To address some concerns that had come up in earlier conversations, we wanted to show that in our first 84 units rented down in Brookfield, there were only 6 school-age children. That's a function of the design. We have very small units, the unit mixing, and frankly, this type of product appeals to millennials and seniors. It's not designed for families. So when we talk about what we think is addressing the town of Portland with the project, we are filling in something that's not yet offered. The town center, retail shops, office space. We think this is a great, great start to to create that feeling. The high-end housing option, millennials and seniors, and of course, incorporating the historic preservation to maintain that feel. So we would take the architectural pieces that are represented with both the historic buildings and just the area overall, and integrate it also into the new buildings. And that will give a cohesive presentation. Now, from the standpoint of other things that go on, I mean, we have obviously jobs. When you build a complex of this size, there's a lot of work to be done. And it absolutely naturally draws from the local community. We, as an example, this is a little hard to see, but some of that field stone that was on the front of the building, this is directly across the street. This is from the Barnbeck Place job in Brookfield. This contractor had a healthy six-figure contract in the landscaping and did a nice renovation of a structure here that used to be like an abandoned boatyard, and they just it was a nice example of both local contractor getting work, putting it some of the proceeds of it into the surrounding area, and that's just one data point down there on one job. But this is a common occurrence. So you also draw from the region, but we introduced through this project obviously new residents to the area. More shoppers come in just because there's a shopping center here, and it has a ripple effect to the surrounding properties. Clearly, also, we're cleaning up a problem site. The Elmcrest Hospital's been closed for almost 10 years, and that leads to what it leads to, the decaying buildings, vandalism, all that type of stuff. Now, I wanted to dive into something that we actually had a version of this presented ready for the zoning commission, but we didn't get to present it. But I think it's appropriate to go through here, which is a comparison from the tax revenue that is derived from kind of the status quo, right? So no development scenario. And the property now pays $94,000 a year in taxes. And so over a planning period, again, anything when it gets actually built and phased and all that, it gets a little more complicated. But this is a representative treatment of revenue to the town that occurs even with a 7-year deferral of assessment, and then of assessment increase, and then I'll get into subsequent steps after that. But if we go line item by line item, the building permitting fees are roughly estimated at about $250,000. They come in over a period of time as you're building out, but for sake of simplicity, we put it in the first two for a construction period. Then as you have occupants at the residential side, they have cars, and cars, even with the deferral of assessment on the property itself, get taxed, and that's income to the town. So we have that stepping up with the growth in occupancy. Then you have users of the water and sewer infrastructure. So you've got 50,000, 75, 91, and so on. And again, we're totaling this over this period. Then on commercial contents, we made some adjustments here. We had some original cuts with everything full on retail. With some of those changes we made to accommodate the Hart Jarvis house, we have office above. Office doesn't generate lots of contents, a lot of income from things that are inside it the way that retail does. But again, here's another revenue line item. And then we also have a concept that we haven't really talked through, but it's to highlight, because I'm looking to put it all out there that everything I can think of, I'm trying to put on the table. And this implies the value of the property as it stands now, and then a premium on the land assessment, which is related to the entitlement that would be achieved through the site plan application. So what you have is, with a going forward scenario, the assessment that is deferred on being increased is for the improvements. you still have property taxes coming in on the land, and it's reasonable to project a 50% bump in the cash flows related to land taxes. So over that period of time, you have basically $2.9 million that come in, and you're comparing that against the do nothing, leave it the way that it is, and just the old taxes. So it's a couple $1 million during the deferral period. Now, it gets a lot more interesting when that deferral period ends and you take some assumptions. We had put out some numbers that we are used to seeing on a per unit basis. Now, the mill rate in Portland is higher than some of the markets we operate in, so we did an adjustment upward from $2,100 per unit to $2,500. And if people have reviewed the first cut that was taken by the assessor, they were at a higher number here and I think a lower number on commercial. But the big picture adds up to similar numbers. So in terms of the new revenue to the town, we have a top line of the 595, the 343. You subtract out the land that I was alluding to earlier at 141, and at the end of the deferral period, it's about $800,000. $800,000 per year of income to the town. Now, if the 91,800 square feet full-on most aggressive approach gets built out, then it's a little better than that. It's another $50,000 better. And that's because we would have been successful in being able to lease the office, which is on the entire second floor of that A building I was showing earlier. Next thing kind of just aggregates what we were just talking about. So at those end years, there was revenue to the town of 365, then another 8. Again, you get 116 for a number with the 75,000 square foot build out, and another $50,000 for the other one. So I think that the thing I would be questioning if I'm a selectman trying to get my head around this is, well, what are the associated costs? And I would argue that if we were all going off into the Wild West and building a new town from scratch, it'd be a different process. But we have an investment that's in place where we have a lot of fixed cost investments already in all of the infrastructure that is supporting a town. And so you've got the schools, you've got the roads, police, fire, utilities, all that type of stuff, especially the low-hanging fruit when you're talking about different things I've seen since I've been up here. And we had sewer and water fees go up. Well, this can be an immediate contributor to that without any investment by the town. So there are essentially operating costs related to this that are really governed by the Board of Selectmen. Every decision you're making when you're bonding or to just operating your normal budget. And actually, I did step over one piece. I didn't mention this, so excuse me. The money raised in a given year for the latest town budget is about $26 million. So these are material 4 or 5% increases in revenue to the town's coffers. And I think that's an important point. When I break down the associated costs, you could argue that there's no need to spend more on this development. You have new revenues that come in immediately, and then it dramatically increases over time. And I threw out an analogy that might be closer to home. I don't know anyone well who has 7 kids, but the idea is this. So say you got 7 kids, and how much does kid number 8 cost if you're already set up for the others? And by the way, if you knew that that 8th kid was gonna, in 8 years start giving you $1 million a year, might not be such a bad idea. So we're pitching the concept of stepping off and doing this project to address the goals that we've been able to identify from our 1.5 years of getting to know people up here, and having built it into models for being creative, where we're taking the things that are within our control collectively, the town and the developer, and saying, okay, there are substantial costs to the historic restoration. And I'm going to go back to one thing just because it's an important point. We are proposing to take care of Brainerd in its entirety and Sage in place in its entirety. We're proposing to move the Hart Jarvis house, but we have not had the enough process with the folks who have advocated for it being moved to here to identify the use. And so when we take a kind of a stage gate approach to developing, our request is to go forward, kind of reinstate where we believed we were in February of 2015, which was that we were approved for a 7-year abatement on the improvements to this parcel, and say, okay guys, we got the Brainerd house, we got the Sage house, we're going to do all this other stuff and get it going. As you know, I've talked about the risk factor on whether or not this is the full 90 some odd or 70 some odd of commercial. That can easily get incorporated into an agreement with the Selectmen. But it would seem a great idea to me to take this trophy asset that everybody's going to see when they come into town and have a public dialogue about what do we want to use that 2,200 square foot building that will look beautiful for, so that we can refine and make sure that we have the support infrastructure there to service it. And so you can't get everything worked out and say, okay, tell me exactly what's going on, because we still have to go to the zoning commission and go through a site plan application, and there'll be a lot of detailing that occurs on this plan. Then when that plan is finished, you go to the state, and the state looks at the intersection here, whether or not you can turn in over there. And so there are small things that will need to be refined, but we propose to do a divide and conquer approach, continue to work with the town, and have this be largely the development plan. It'll be very close. And at this point, it won't be hard to put parameters on what are the gotta-haves for this. And we proposed it in the application. It was essentially 75,000 square feet of commercial, no more than 240 units of residential, the restoration of the buildings as I've outlined in this presentation. And with that, we believe that it's possible to start this job in 2017 in the spring if we can be in the fall before the zoning commission working on the site plan application. So as much as this was a complicated one. I've worked on a lot of jobs over the years. Because of the historic structures, this took a lot of creativity to come up with something that was within our control and actionable. But I believe that what we have, I know that what we have with the current environment, which is very interest rate driven, very bank lending driven. I'm on the board of a bank. I sat in a very depressing meeting this morning talking about investing in Connecticut real estate and prospects. But we believe that this is a creative way in a not that strong economy to really do something cool. And so we're asking for your consideration. We appreciate your listening to our presentation. I'm certainly here to answer any questions that I can, and thank you for your time.
Selectmen, we'll go back to our seats. Thank you.
Would you like me to turn this off, Susan?
Please.
Thank you.
I don't think she wants the light on her. I'll speak for her.
Oh, thank you.
I'll get-
I'll agree.
Let there be one.
I just wanted to let the selectmen know that Elwin Giles, who's head of our, chairman of our Economic Development Commission meeting, Economic Development Commission, couldn't be here at the meeting tonight. But he did want to point out to the selectmen that he hopes which will include a balanced outcome, one that provides needed incentive to the developer while enhancing the town's local business economy. There's also folks here tonight. I know Rick Shar is here from the Economic Development Commission. I'm sure there's other folks here tonight too. I thought I saw Rick come in earlier. Yeah, there he is. That may want to make comment, but before we get to that, I'll open it up for the selectmen if there's questions. I'll start with Kitch. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Can't hear you in the back.
Okay.
Speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Is it working? Okay, great. The Barnbeck development project, that's not age limited, it's open for any resident. And how long did it take to be fully occupied?
It is being completed as we speak. And
Okay.
so we have maybe 3 COs left to get. So I would say that the market acceptance of it was good. And we probably have 120 of the 165 units leased currently. So while it was under construction, the first building opened in November last year. And that was not, you don't open buildings for Thanksgiving, that's just not good timing. And so the leasing really got going in earnest in the spring. There were a handful of people. But I would say that the absorption's been strong on that project.
Okay. And does that project also have a commercial component?
No, it doesn't.
It's purely residential?
It's purely residential, and it has, that barn is an amenity to the residences.
Okay. So I guess some of the questions that I have to do with the motor vehicle tax and then the water and sewer monies that will be collected for the town. So that's happening pretty quickly at Barnbeck.
Yeah, no, actually, that happens, for sure, yes, is the short answer, because as people come in, you're right, they're using it, and that's, that gets billed on a usage basis for water. In that environment, it's a flat fee on sewer, so actually, it's more the developer's problem, where if it's open, then you're just paying whatever it is for the unit. But a lot of municipalities have it's scaled to water usage for both.
Okay. I guess some of the other questions I have, as I was trying to write in the semi-darkness. The possibility of the second floor of the building, of the commercial, the larger commercial building. Do you think that there's still need for office space? Are you looking at one firm or one occupant or multiples?
It would be many, because it's 35,000 square feet, so that is.
So it would
that's
be
a lot
broken
of
in,
space.
it would be broken up?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right.
There'd be a shared lobby, and my feeling is, and this is sort of informed by discussions with our partners and brokers as well, is that the office space will be attractive just for its uniqueness in this little town center.
So you feel that people will, firms or corporations might want it simply because of the placement?
I think that, yes, but in small, we're not gonna get GE to come in and take the
No,
the
they're
floor,
gone.
right?
They're gone.
That one's probably it's too soon, right, for
Right.
any GE jokes, but I think that smaller, tenants, 4,000 or 5,000 square foot tenants, could easily be, broken up into pieces and have a common corridor there.
In your guesstimate, how soon do you think, talking about a potential three-year build-out, right? Is that what you're hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's potentially aggressive, but it's not gonna go past 5. I mean, that's why we said 3.5 to 5 in the application.
So based on past experience, how quickly do you think it would become occupied, both the commercial and the residential pieces?
There are requirements in the zoning regs for parity between the two.
Mhm.
And so we have, effectively, if we look at this site plan, you'd have Brainerd House, this residential building, and then a ring going around this
Mhm.
way. That would be the first part of the construction. And if you did a section of this building, this would be something we'd be working on the site plan application side of things, to say, in a phasing plan, how we would qualify to build this building, and then the remaining square footage would be the qualifier for that to come online.
Okay.
So, in terms of investment, one of the headwinds to this job has been that it got approved years ago, but then it just hasn't been able to get any traction. And so in the marketplace, there's been some, well, we'll wait and see in terms of the tenant response to our peddling. A rescission of a tax agreement doesn't necessarily help our saying we're all set to go. We had some noise on the the zoning reg. However, none of those are fatal wounds. We're looking at this saying, we are the decision maker. There's no going out and saying, hey, do you want to rent an apartment in the next 18 months? Well, you can sign up here and we'll build it for you, right? We have to just step off and make that product and then build it. So there's a substantial investment in this that's already got a green light from our internal crew. Then these other smaller pieces, there is interest in this parcel. The smaller pieces you can easily do on spec. So there's enough to get the engine turning. And the feedback we've had from the marketplace is, show me this is real, and that you're actually going to build something. And then we'll continue, our talks. But right now, there's some skepticism that there's forward progress in it.
Okay, I can understand the skepticism. So I live in a historic home. So what you're proposing insofar as the historic pieces is quite lovely. I'm still skeptical of the project in its entirety. And I guess, well, it's not a guess for me. I'm struggling with the tax abatement for the residential piece. I don't, I guess I'm not that comfortable with the abatement for the residential piece. And I know it's a whole project. It's not just.
It's an enabling mechanism.
Mhm.
So there are pieces to delivering the quality of the product, right, that are facilitated by the tax abatement. One example is under each building, there's parking below. And that's much more expensive to provide that experience than to have a lot of surface parking surrounding.
Understood.
On this same acreage, you could have much more visible parking in cars, which to me is not necessarily desirable when you've gone to all the effort to restore historic buildings. And so you have, from the prior plan to this one, in terms of just something in the low 800s of parking spaces, you have 250 in this area where you're transitioning to other residential uses that are now out of sight, right, of parking capacity. And I think that's very significant, because you have a grade that comes down at each bench point. Now, you're right. Unfortunately, this is a package deal. We thought that when we were taking the field and making commitments on what was possible to do in this marketplace, that there was just a matter of negotiating fine points of, language on the tax agreement. So since February of 2015, we were under the impression that we had a tax agreement with the town. So when we said we can do the Brainerd house, then that was with that built in. when we said we could do this product and we could specify the internal fit up on the level of what we've done in Fairfield County, it's also because of the tax agreement, because we're doing something that's speculative on the price point and quality level of the apartments themselves. It'll be wonderful for the town, but we're needing to be at a rent that is above the market that has ever been done in Middletown or here. Not by a lot, but by enough for us to say, okay, because we're all working together, we'll have the investment made to do the podium, have the granite countertops, the whole 9 yards of what the internal fit up is, so that we actually get the demographic here that would choose to be here because it's a nice niche offering. And that's actually what I've come to the conclusion on is the only way to do things in Connecticut at this point, because there's a lot of weakness in the local economy, and it's just, you gotta find something that differentiates yourself. And so we're building all this stuff into the model, and huge chunks of money are going into historic restoration, but the other huge amounts of money are going into doing a high quality product, and that helps take away some of the risk. Because if you look at this, I've said to Fred 7 times, I mean, I love you like an uncle, but I don't know about doing this up here. And it largely is because this is not a common practice in town. The scale of job is a foreign animal. And so there's been a lot of noise in the process where I don't want to be the bad guy up here. And I feel like I've been depicted that way many times.
And I understand that, and I appreciate your saying that this evening. But so one of the things I heard just now is that the higher level of amenities is dependent upon the tax abatement.
It's part of the risk taking. No, let me
Go ahead,
explain.
go ahead, yeah.
And so when they talk about in the Cecil group, there was specific language about, I termed it absorption, but it was, they used some other language, but it amounted to that, to your lease-up duration, okay? You can rent anything if you mark the price down to $700,
Right.
it'll be filled in a week. So the trick is to do something that has the balance between the investment you made to create a quality product and the necessary cash flow to support that investment.
It's finding the sweet spot.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the idea is that without that support, I don't have a lot of interest in taking the speculation on Portland, even in the residential piece, because there isn't, like I say, I was in a board meeting this morning in Fairfield County talking about how weak Westport and Greenwich are. And it's not better here, you know what I mean? And so I don't like to be negative about anything because I'm the biggest optimist around. However, you have to be a realist. And so when you're going to a bank and you're saying, we're going to create a new product, we've done things like this in downtown Danbury where we said, well, there is no market like this, but we have the following buffers, and we're going to create that product, and they will come, and they have. And so we've been successful in doing that. Now, from the standpoint of each project, I mean, we can talk about Barnbeck Place, we can talk about Berkeley Commons, we can talk about something called Kennedy Place, Kennedy Flats. But these are all projects that we've been involved in where it was a multi-year process getting them going, and we've always seen the jobs through and made them work. And so I think the process on our side is we came up and day one said, well, Fred, you got an approval here for a big shopping center. Nobody wants to come. And then the town designated part with the state and all that, designated 6 different buildings as historic. We announced the American condemnation, right? And so I'm trying to say to them, Jesus, this is aggressive. show me that somebody actually wants to do something. And so we came up and we addressed this board. And in one meeting, we got a thumbs up, and legitimate questions from Mr. Flood, which I've tried to spend a lot of time answering tonight.
So
you get what I mean? That process was always mixed use, right? So the tax abatement was for the entire project.
I understand.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
so I wasn't on that
No,
boat,
no,
you know,
no,
and
I
I,
don't mean to belabor
and
it.
I know,
I just
and I
mean
know,
to-
and I'm not trying to
Okay,
belabor it
I'm
either.
sorry.
I just, but thank you, because this has been a great information exchange
Sure.
for me. And I don't want to take up all the time, so if I could potentially come back if there's more discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Brian?
Sure, I don't think I have any questions, but I'll make some comments, particularly being the only person who objected to this tax subsidy in the past. I'll make some comments based on your presentation. You mentioned that that this was endorsed through the Board of Selectmen endorsed the VCI report. Just for clarification, we spent about 20 minutes defining endorsement, so there was no strong endorsement of this by any means. And the word endorsement, I think, was ultimately defined as an acceptance or a recognition of the report. So there was no full endorsement by the board of that. The report also really focused on what was most viable, I think, economically, not necessarily what was in the best interest of the town of Portland in terms of this location. And I think that's where the apartments came from, and I think that gets lost on a lot of people, because I don't know through all of the questioning that the townspeople were saying, we want apartments, we want apartments. I don't think that was the case at all. I think really the report really indicated that was just what was most economically, financially viable for this place, as opposed to condominiums or some other sort of project. As far as the tax agreement, I was the only person back in February of 2015 at that time who objected to the tax agreement, and the main reason was because I knew absolutely nothing about what you were proposing. And to me, if I'm going to give someone a tax subsidy, it's really a giveaway, in my opinion. And it's taxpayers' money, and I'm looking this through the lens of the taxpayers. I want to know what we're doing and whether there's actually a reason why we should incentivize someone to come in and put a project together there. And at that time, there were absolutely no answers whatsoever, and I don't know that there's been all that many answers to date either. Quite honestly, we spent the last year and a half going through this, and in my opinion, wasting an awful lot of time.
What would an appropriate scope be that would answer your?
I think you should apply to the planning and zoning and put a site application together so we know what actually is going to be presented and what's going to be built there before we actually agree to give a tax subsidy. That just,
Sure.
and I understand where you're coming from.
Well, no, it requires.
Actually, some skin in the game, I think, correct.
No, there's skin in the game. You got a year and a half of my life in this.
Year and a half. I haven't seen really any financial skin in the game necessarily.
But you don't have.
And it's been a
access
year
to
and a half
that.
of my life,
You
too.
don't have access to that information.
No.
I couldn't say that there's easily 6 figures of
Okay.
investment out of my pocket. And so from the standpoint of, that goes up quickly when you ask for the next step, but the back and forth, and one of the things I said in February of 2015 when I came in skeptical of the town's appetite to do anything, was this is a two-way street, you know? And so we are saying this is what's possible, and frankly, we'd like to do it if, I mean, frankly, I'd like to do it because I want to help the town. It's just that simple. And so, it's just a bizarre reason to sit here as a business person in the middle of my career and tell you that, but that's well
Sure.
done. So, if I can, I can, right? And so, I'm not gonna, I don't love Fred that much, I'm not gonna go down, just, you know, over this. And so, you can't in this game, this development business, just step off and hope.
Sure.
You gotta
I would say that I don't, again, being the only person who voted against Now, at the time, I don't quite understand how you came away from that meeting believing that you were getting a 7% tax subsidy,
It's what the
a
application
tax subsidy
said.
for
It's what the
7 years.
It's what the application said.
Well, really what
And
it was is that
in-
Susan was going to be the person who was negotiating it as opposed to the Board of Selectmen. It was very clear that there was no tax abatement being
Well,
given
and-
for 7
And if I
years.
come away tonight, and it's very clear that there's no way in creation you're going to be able to move forward, then I have to move on.
Sure.
The point is that I'm trying, having spent this time, that to come up with something that I believe actually is an elegant solution at the end of a lot of process, because we're not actually proceeding on hope.
Sure.
When we say, okay, let's do this, that, and the other piece of the historic restoration based on a state grant, and you look at the state's finances, that's a wing and a prayer.
Sure. I actually hope that that something can be developed on that project. I have purposely, deliberately stayed out of this. This went through the planning and zoning. I didn't attend any of those meetings. I didn't get involved in that at all as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I look at this as, my role really relates to this tax subsidy that you're talking about. And that's it. And that's really as far as it goes, as being a member of the Board of Selectmen. So I kind of look at the history of this property as well. And, you know, I do look at it from, you know, because I'm not here to stop capitalism. If that works, that's fine, that's great.
This is high-mindedness. When I look at it,
High-mindedness.
Yeah, let me say why I believe that. Fred's the last man standing, right? There were two doctors who ran this hospital for many, many years and cared deeply, and their family seems to be willing to allow a lot of process to have a good result for the town come out the backside of it, because that's in the spirit of their fathers who were running this hospital for many years, and they care deeply about the town, and I believe they were good corporate citizens. This is all the lore I have heard since I've come on the scene. You would all know better, but that's my understanding, and Fred is trying to carry on what they always did at that property, and I'm just.
So calling me high-minded is somewhat interesting to me, but the way that I look at it, this is a property
Yeah,
that.
I'm saying that Fred is, if I wasn't clear.
Referring to you.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, no, I meant.
Sure.
I meant-
All right, my apologies.
Yeah, no, so no, forgive me for being unclear,
Sure.
I didn't mean.
But I look at this as a property that was purchased on speculation, right? He's an investor. He's doing it, and that's great if those are his goals, that he's doing it all for the
One-
town
one
of
at a time,
Portland.
one at a
But
time.
I have to believe he's investing in it to make some money, right? To make a profit, obviously, right? And it seems like you're suggesting something different.
He's the last man
Sure.
standing. There aren't.
Sure.
This property didn't transfer. This was, it was held all the way through, including when it was sold to the St. Francis Hospital. And then they decided to not run it anymore, and they stopped, at least, the business was sold to them, and the property was then leased to them, and then when they stopped operating, no, this has remained an ownership structure that's continuous, is that correct? Yeah, this is not something where he didn't enter. He worked with these guys for 40 years. So, just to clear up, and I'm glad to have this dialogue, because
Sure.
it clears up some misconceptions.
Are you suggesting that he's not involved in this, it has nothing to do with financial reasons or financial benefit?
Frankly, I'm going through this, flopping around on the spit here, while could sell this for more money to an affordable housing developer, and it would be a completely different ballgame. So I am telling you that he could sell that parcel for more money to someone taking a completely different development approach. And that's what I'm talking about, where frankly, I've looked for my get out of jail free card on this a couple of times, and I hang in there and I say, okay, if we made progress with the zoning commission, maybe we can make progress here. I've been transparent all along in saying what the gotta-haves are to do what our proposal is, because frankly, we thought we already were there, and now we're kind of trying to get back to where we were. But to be consistent, I've been saying we can do Brainerd House, and we can do Sage House, and now I'm basically saying with these changes to that A building, we're just talking about, we can move our trucks.
So I have no idea.
Go ahead.
You did ask a question in terms of Fred,
Answer
so
your question
I'll allow him.
directly. I will not have an income tax problem when we sell this property. I will not have an income tax problem.
That means there's no gain
That means
off the
there's no gain.
basis.
Sure.
So you have a situation, that I don't think is well understood collectively. Fred is committed to, doing the right thing. I've seen his son in his stead, is less inclined. Everyone else is less inclined. I'm here basically saying, I figured out a puzzle that maybe it was just an intellectual exercise for me, and that's all it's going to amount to at the end of the day. But this is, what I have on the table is actionable.
Sure. So I have no idea whether I'm in the minority or the majority, but I do look at this through the taxpayer's eyes here. And what you're asking them to do essentially is take a property that has been in someone's control, that has deteriorated, that has become blighted, and you're asking the taxpayers essentially to bail him out or to bail this out and pay to renovate these properties. And how? Through a tax subsidy, a tax giveaway. That's what you're asking to be done. How is it not true? Has the property?
One at a time.
Has the property
One at a time.
deteriorated
Brian,
over 10 years?
what's your question?
I'm asking if it's deteriorated over the last 10 years.
Number one,
Fred?
over the 9-year period, as it stands now, we collect $900,000. Even with assessment, we collect $2,900,000, even with abatement, right? So even during the abatement period, as compared to where it stands now, the town collects $2 million more. And then at the bonus, at the end, time goes by, you collect over $1 million a year. The town is not, there's no taxpayers laying out money. You're not collecting that money, you're not collecting the $1 million.
Who do you
Turn
think
down
is
the abatement,
subsidizing you?
Turn down the abatement, nothing happens, you still collect $94,000.
Who do you think is subsidizing you over all those years?
Who's subsidizing
Yeah.
me? I have myself and my two partners.
You don't think the taxpayers are subsidizing you over all those years?
No,
You don't?
no.
Okay?
Do you think that the historic buildings, millions of dollars going into the restoration, that those are not?
One at a
sold?
time, please.
Well, no. but
Your turn, Dan.
Do you think that the dollars that are getting directed into this historic restoration lead to value?
I believe those are the responsibility of the owners of the property. That's what I believe.
And in all fairness, if I may.
One at a time.
If I may, next.
If we could, did you finish your answer? I want to
Yeah.
keep order in this room.
Oh, absolutely.
That's very
Yeah.
important. Are you finished with your, okay. Ben?
I was just going to point out, for the historic restoration, that was the trade-off for the recent text amendment. We changed our zoning regulations. The 4 members who voted in favor of it felt they had enough teeth in their regulation to get the historic restoration of the structures or whatever on that property, and they went from a ratio of 1:3 to 1:16. That was the trade-off for the historic restoration. So I want to be careful when we're talking about a trade-off tonight, referring to a tax abatement to restore historic structures, when the trade-off for the historic structures, so we're clear in the planning and zoning reg, was the increase up to 240 units. That was the trade-off for the preservation of those buildings, because that was what what went on that night, and that was the comfort level that commission voted on.
You're making
Dan?
a representation
Yep.
that implies a position I've taken. I would ask you to cite something specific that came from me or my team that indicated that, because when we started the whole process with the zoning commission, we had an approved tax abatement.
There was never an approved tax abatement by the town of Portland.
We pursued-
Susan Bransfield
we
put that on the
All right,
record.
hold on.
Okay.
I'm going to interject.
Please.
The process for a tax abatement is an application is made to the town. The application then is reviewed by town staff. Then this board determines if the application is accepted. The application that was based on Anthony Fonda's site plan was approved by this board. The application. And the next step in the abatement process is that an actual agreement is formulated based on what state statutes allow, which, as you stated earlier, Dan, is the maximum, which is the 7-year full abatement, which is the difference between the current taxes that are paid, or the current assessment, and that by which there is an improvement made. So that delta is the only area that can be forgiven in terms of taxes for up to 7 years. But that agreement was never promulgated. And I'm not finished. Okay. And this board, as you know, and as I think the audience knows, withdrew that application approval because that site plan that Anthony Fonda, as the developer, put forward is no longer on the table. So the new application is based on the schematic that was presented tonight. It is not a site plan. It is the schematic that you presented, Dan, tonight, with more detail in terms of your discussion. That application, which is in the office, has not been approved yet by town staff. I should say, excuse me, I used the wrong word. That application has not been fully reviewed. There may be a need for more information, but at this point, I don't have something to bring back to this board. So the application has not come to this board other than in the verbiage that's presented tonight. So just to clarify.